industry. What does that mean? Well, the folks that design projects all have nationally recognized professional certifications. But there isn't really a nationally recognized until we were established in 71, one for constructors. And so our old goal is to push that across as many different facets as we can throughout the United States. We offer two different levels of credentials. The entry level CAC is really geared towards four-year graduates of construction management programs, or for those transitioning into construction management from other industries or within the construction industry itself. We're proud to say that we have over 30 universities that support the CAC exam, and most of them use it as a benchmark as to how successful and how well their students are educated before they leave, before they graduate. We follow up with a CPC, which is our second level of certification, which is ideally established for the constructors who have several years of experience at project oversight and who are seeking to take their career to the next level. We're excited to have Visory, like I said, as a corporate sponsor, and thank you for allowing me a quick talk.
Thank you so much. Yeah, always, like I said, I've read a lot about the organization, and we've been really enjoyed working with you on this program. So the format of our presentation, we have three panelists, and they're each going to give you the top three things they want construction professionals to know about cybersecurity from their vantage point. So first up is going to be James Suh from RT Specialty. And this is a leading wholesale distributor of specialty insurance products. So James is going to give you the ins and outs of what a policy looks like, what it's going to entail, what you should look for, what you should expect. And up next will be Michael Ryan from Farmer Woods Insurance. This is an insurance brokerage firm with expertise in various areas of risk management, and they have a national footprint. And Michael's going to delve more into the client side of insurance, what he has seen when his clients have gotten hit and when they have and have not had a policy in place. And Sam Schuemacher is representing Visory. He is going to dive into the technology side of things, tell you a little bit about what he has seen, and give you some ways you can immediately up-level your cybersecurity posture. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to James.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me today. Today, I wanted to talk just a little bit about some of the major policy triggers, or what we call policy exposures that a contractor has when it comes to cybersecurity and data breach security. Contractors, in many senses, are a little bit different than many other organizations in that in my world, in my neck of the woods, contractors are a little bit not as versed in cybersecurity as much as some of the other industries are, such as finance and healthcare side, as it's usually law driven on that side as well. For contractors, the five policy exposure that seems to be coming into effect when we talk about cyber exposure and cyber coverages are ransomware, fraudulent wire transfers, what we call business interruption, and breach of intellectual property, and which alongside of that comes breach of bid data as well. So on a ransomware side, when we talk about ransomware, it's usually we're talking about where a bad actor will hold or lock down your system in return for a ransom from you to unlock it. So if you're using in your system, creating bids, creating invoices, creating whatever that may be, and you're locked out of your system and you can't access any of your clients, that will give you a downtime, which then results in a financial loss because the bad actors are wanting a return on the release keys to get into your system. So that becomes an exposure. Another exposure that is big for the contractors world is fraudulent wire transfers. Many times contractors deal with, vendors as well as subcontractors who are paid electronically, whether through wire transfer or other means that are done online. And bad actors will find a way to get in and impersonate to have those transfers sent to the bad actor rather than the actual recipient who's supposed to be receiving that funds. The other thing is business interruption. Again, when you're down, whether it be a ransomware or maybe you had a breach in your system and your system is not functioning correctly, what we call downtime or business interruption prevents you from doing your everyday business. And in a contracting world, if you guys have a deadline to finish a contracting job or bid job, and you are shut down from your system and you can't get to it quick enough, that downtime of lost income is then covered by an insurance exposure on an insurance policy. So there's a way to get coverage for that. Then the last thing is a breach of intellectual property, which includes bid data as well. Now, if you're holding bid data or plans of a building, or if you're holding intellectual property in the sense that, you know, you have a proprietary information on a contract that needs to be done, those all can be breached and taken from you, and then at that point used in other ways or sold, or to have you lose your proceeds in some way, shape, or form. And that portion of it is also covered under the insurance as well. From my experience in dealing with cybersecurity in the contracting world, most of the claims have come from ransomware and fraudulent wire transfer side. That seems the biggest exposure for most of them. I did have a claim recently where a wire transfer fraud went wrong, and a general contractor who was working with many subcontractors, the bad actors implemented a phishing attack on the insured, on the general contractor, where they went in, figured out one of the employees were newer, and they were impersonating Microsoft as a security clearance, and they would go in and ask them, hey, your security clearance is not working well. Would you give me your credentials so that we can fix your credentials? The employee wasn't aware. The email looked like it was from Microsoft. You know, divulged all of their security protocols, their passwords, their email. Then they used that to impersonate a wire transfer to one of the general contractors that they were trying to get proceeds from. And the general contractor, because he came from somebody that they had always dealt with, wire the money, basically, to the tune of $93,000. Once it's gone, it's very hard to recoup. And it's a loss that they probably could have prevented had there been a multi-factor authentication in place, or a two-factor authentication in place, where they would check the credentials before wiring. Those plans were not in place, did not have an insurance policy that required those credentials, and they ended up paying out, basically, is what happened. So those scenarios are pretty common in the contracting world, and you know, professionals such as I or Michael, everybody on these panels, probably versed in how we can help support mitigate some of those losses for the contracting world. In the sense that bid rigging and the bid data, we've seen a little bit of uptick in the intellectual property side recently. Usually in the cyberspace, we have two separate coverages, what we call third party and a first party. First party losses are where you have to pay out of pocket because it's a loss of money for you directly. Third party is when bad actors use you to go out and infringe upon others, and that creates a loss for others. And when that creates financial loss for others, and it came from you as the starting point, then you may be brought into suit to basically make those third parties whole for their financial losses. And cyber policy does both on both ends. So if you can, trying to put together a plan that includes a insurance professional, a technology specialist, maybe a law professional as well, those plans can help mitigate some of the losses that you guys have. Thank you.
Thanks, James. I did not, I learned something with the first party and third party information. So thank you for giving us that. And then I'll hand things over to Michael.
Again, good morning, and thank you for having me, Megan. Thank you for having me on the panel. I'm here to talk a little bit. First of all, my name is Michael Bryan, Farmer Woods Insurance. I'm on the retail side of the equation. I deal directly with the policyholders, clients, and prospects of mine. Here to talk a little bit about some of the actual claims scenarios that happened to my clients. Two of them have had cyber insurance and one of them did not. To kind of piggyback off of what James was saying, talking about the ransomware, social engineering, that's exactly what's happening. That is happening to my clients. The first one is and all three of these are contractors. The first one is a solar contractor company. The bad actors got into their network via an old VPN network that wasn't being patched that my client was not aware of. They got into the network. They were snooping around in there for about 60 days. What happened was they could go in and see the client list, the project lists, the tax returns, what kind of revenue the company was doing. They were reading employees' emails, the CEO's emails. And then one day, my client came into the office and tried to start the day with their turning the computers on, and they got a notification that their files had been compromised and a ransomware attack. This company did have cyber insurance, so we immediately turned in the claim. The original ransom was $900,000. The insurance company paid the ransom negotiated it down within 5 days, down to $250K. But before they did that, they had to bring in a IT team to make sure that the malware was not in the system anymore. Because you don't want to pay the ransom and then you still have the malware in there, and then you pay the ransom and then the same thing happens the very next day. So they brought in an IT team to make sure that the network was clean. I would call down there daily. The first time I tried to call to make sure that the claim was going okay, the phone number I would dial the main number to my client, and it would roll to a law firm down in the southern part of Arizona. And I thought I misdialed the number, so I tried it on my cell phone. The same thing happened again, and then I called my client on their cell, and they told me that their telephone networking equipment had been hacked also and was compromised. So all the calls are being redirected to God knows where. But so kind of what James was saying, there's your business interruption loss. If your business lives and dies by the phones and you don't have access, your incoming call stops. There's your business interruption loss. So they paid the ransom and they got all the files back, and they brought in the insurance company brought in a law firm, because once you have a breach of data, the law makes you do certain things. You have to notify all the affected individuals. All the associated costs that go along with that were covered by the insurance policy. So they get the files back, but everything was just, once when you get it back, it's not where it was when you had it in your network. Everything was all in the wrong place. Tax returns, client data, everything was just out of sorts. It was like 2 months of all hands on deck to put everything back to where it was before. Meanwhile, and all the while you're trying to run your business. The second one I had was another contractor, and kind of what piggybacking on what James was saying is that the individual who's responsible for sending out invoices for payment, his email was compromised. All his emails were being intercepted. The invoices were being manipulated and then sent to the recipient, and the recipient was paying off the phony wire transfer instructions. This turned out to be a third-party claim. Kind of, again, piggyback on what James was saying, because there was no policy trigger, because there was no policy trigger until the lawsuit came. Okay, so that was the policy trigger. Okay, so the defense and indemnification was paid, and also a law firm was brought in to make sure that the malware was out of the system and everything was back to normal. Third one didn't have insurance, and again, this is another contractor. She called me up. It was a ransomware attack, and all the files are compromised. They had a IT company that was responsible for their network, and the IT company that they were working with always promised them that at a moment's notice, there would be a backup ready to go. Well, guess what? Need arose, there was no backup. So needless to say, it was not a good situation for my client. They struggled to get through it. I'm not sure the exact dollars that were involved, but the costs were severe. And again, it was like 3 to 4 months of trying to get luckily they had still a lot of stuff on paper, so they're able to like recreate a new network and obviously hire a new IT company to make sure that that network was secure. Yeah, so the moral of the story really is, kind of like what James is saying again, when you're filling out applications for cyber insurance, just make sure that you're if you don't know the answers, don't guess, okay? And God forbid, don't misrepresent, because if you tell them that you do have MFA and at the time of a loss you don't have MFA, multi-factor authentication, that's the two-party or multi-factor authentication where you get the little text message on your phone with the code that verify your identity. If you misrepresent on those apps intentionally, that could give them basis to deny it.
Thank you so much. I think in hearing those stories, it's amazing how layered everything is. It gets very complicated very quickly. And I love the takeaway that you left with the don't misrepresent yourself. Don't ask questions you don't know the answers to. I literally was just talking to an organization the other day, and they said these questionnaires are so long, and a lot of it I don't understand. And so I just answer what I can. I just answer to the best of my ability. So they're answering everything, but they're not really sure how they're answering it. So that's really interesting that you brought that up.
And Michael and James, you both brought up some really scary stories, and we talked about, recovery from a technology perspective and getting data back and the time it takes to reorganize all of that. Have you seen anything in terms of reputational harm? I mean, it's obviously business downtime, but did it harm their relationships with any of their clients in the cases that you saw?
Yes, it did a little bit, especially with the last one that I talked about, the nursery, the commercial wholesale nursery, delivering tree shrubs and plants. I know they did lose some clients. When your job lists are gone, you have deliveries to make every day, and you can't fulfill those deliveries. What's going to happen is immediately, whoever you're servicing is going to need to get the job done. So they went out and found another wholesale nursery. They did have some downtime, but luckily they had a lot of stuff backed up on paper, so it was pretty easy to recreate what they had before, but there was significant costs and some reputational damage involved for sure.
Yeah, James.
Yeah. So unfortunately on cybersecurity, it's a state law that dictates some of these losses, and every state's a little bit different. And some states have a much harsher requirement for notification than other states. And I've seen in the past where some states have harsh notification requirements where you have to notify within a few, like 30 days of the breach as soon as you find out. And the notification requirements are very specific, like take out a half-page ad in a local newspaper stating that you've had a breach so that you can reach all of the customers that may not be notified in person or through mail, right? We've all gotten notifications from banks where it says, hey, us or a vendor's been breached, but some states even take it a step further than that and make it really difficult. So when you're doing stuff like that and you're notifying in that manner, it has to hurt your reputation in some way. There's some intangible losses of customers that may wanted to use you, but now can't or doesn't want to because they feel like they're exposed when they see something like that. So I've seen some of those scenarios happen in the previous past, and not so much these days because everybody's getting more in tune with how to protect themselves, but it has happened, yes.
Yeah, we see the same. So Megan mentioned, we deal with a couple of really specific verticals: accounting, wealth management, and construction. And I was just talking with some accountants about reporting requirements in cybersecurity insurance yesterday. So all of that was sort of fresh in my mind. So thanks for your input on those. So the three areas that I kind of wanted to talk about today are going to be you are at risk. You are. People are your weakest link, and hope is not lost. So I guess let's talk about risk first. So pretty consistently over the years, we see either financial services or construction at the top of the most frequently attacked industries. There are a lot of reasons for that. Um, a recent Forrester survey showed that 75% of the respondents in construction, engineering, and infrastructure industries had experienced a cyber incident in the last 12 months. So I think that's a really great statistic. It's a bad statistic, but it's a great one to kind of show that the construction industry is definitely a target. Michael and James, you both mentioned that this is due to a couple of factors. Construction is highly collaborative, so those phishing attacks can be extremely successful. You're constantly communicating with different people in different industries, and your subcontractors and your private customers and their vendors, and so you're constantly collaborating via email. And with phishing, it's kind of the spray and pray approach that attackers use, and it works because they're very inexpensively able to get a high volume of attempts out there. And then they just wait for somebody to click. So it often leads to stolen identities or financial. It's often financially motivated, so the identity theft of the credentials end up leading to rerouted wire transfers and things like that, and certainly some brand damage as a intangible consequence at the end of that. And then construction has also historically lagged in implementing new technology, and that's going to include cybersecurity technologies, be it budgetary reasons or just feeling like I'm not a target, or maybe it's just not understanding what you need to do to actually protect your intellectual property and your bids and any of your client data. Um, so 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 what we like to talk with construction about is often about things that they can do that are going to be budget friendly. So we're going to talk about that in the hope is not lost area. But bad actors often use small organizations that are higher risk because of the factors we just talked about, highly collaborative, often haven't implemented the latest and greatest in technology, and probably aren't implementing cybersecurity awareness training and testing, which we're going to talk about next. So those are some of the reasons why you make really good targets, unfortunately. And people continue to be our weakest link. This has not changed over the years. When we look at the successful attacks and we look at the points of entry, people continue to be that number one point of entry. And the reason for that is it is faster and cheaper to hack a human than it is to hack a firewall. So social engineering attacks become really successful for bad actors. And those can be things like vishing with a V, VI, vishing. And so vishing is that voice phishing. If you guys remember the MGM attack from a little better than a year ago, started with a phone call. It's still a really old school and really successful way to manipulate someone into giving up information. And so in that case, they used publicly available information about someone to impersonate that person, and then explain their way around why they couldn't get a two-factor code and get that IT help desk person to reset their password and give it to them over the phone, and boom, they were in the network. So we have to look out for still those phone calls. They could use that smishing. So those text messages that we get, I think we're all pretty much aware of those at this point, but some of those can still look pretty convincing. Megan, how often do you get the hey, your Amazon driver is trying to find your house, but can you send us the address?
Oh, absolutely. I feel like that's weekly at
Oh yeah.
minimum.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then the QR phishing, the crishing, kind of a weird word to say. Michael, are you up to speed on that one?
No.
All right. How about you,
Phishing.
James? QR
Yeah, I
phishing, you
heard
got
from
that one?
Uptick. Yes, yes.
Yep. So
Mm.
2020, we all got desensitized to using our cell phones and scanning those QR codes at
Yeah.
restaurants, right? Nobody was giving out physical menus. And the only way to find out what you could order was to scan the QR code. Well, bad actors figured out they could weaponize those. So now you'll start to see QR codes, and you'll start to see vendors putting the full URL under them in case you don't want to scan the QR code. So that was an interesting evolution over the last couple of years. But that's why we have to train our teams. That's why we have to make sure that our teams are aware of the threats that are out there, because they're constantly evolving. So cybersecurity awareness training and testing becomes so critical. And James, how often are those on your insurance form?
They're often quite well, yes and no. We work with vendors that help with that. I think what cyber insurance does is when we offer cyber policy, it includes a lot of those things that you're talking about. Working with a vendor that'll do forensics, working with a vendor that will help the client prevent just going through their system, making sure things are there. Many of the insureds have sometimes two-factor authentication or MFA, and they don't even know that they have it because they're buying their email servers through a G Suites or like a Gmail, Google Suites, or like a Microsoft 365, which offer it automatically on their system, right? If they buy it into it. And many times they don't know the jargon, they don't know the wording, and they may have it, they may not have it. But I think what happens is when you purchase an insurance policy and work with professionals and vendors such as yourselves, and what it does is it brings a whole team of risk mitigation into your fold without you even having to blink an eye.
Yeah, so we help customers fill out their insurance renewals. So we have customers, we manage their security, and they come to us and say, "Hey, Sam, we've got this insurance renewal form. We want to make sure we're answering it correctly. Can you fill out your parts?" And our parts, of course, means the services that we're providing. And we consistently, over the last 12 to 18 months, have pretty consistently seen three things that started to show up on forums a couple years ago. But now they're really consistent, and those are going to be threat hunting. So do you have threat hunting on your endpoints, multi-factor authentication that we've talked about a lot today, and then cybersecurity awareness training and testing started showing up on those forums more consistently. So those are the three things that we're seeing as a trend from the insurance side for sure. All right, so I love statistics, so I've got a couple more that I think are going to really support what you heard from James and Michael. So 2019, a study showed that 90% of successful breaches started with human error. So that could be clicking on a link, it could be sending data to the wrong person, or sending unencrypted personally identifiable information. We see that in some other industries, but 90% in 2019. In 2024, a study showed that 91% of cyber attacks started with a phishing email. And you guys have been talking about it here this hour. Phishing continues to be the number one trend. And we can kind of call phishing attacks human error too, right? Because that's someone that's unaware, clicking on something they shouldn't click on, or moving too fast and not recognizing the red flags. And then insider threats. So another study recently showed that 90% of leaders are worried about insider threats. And remember, insider threats aren't always malicious. Sometimes it's just due to negligence. So when we think about backups, a backup is only as good as the last time you tried to restore it successfully. So those testing the backups. It reminds me of a story of a construction company that took their Sage software back in-house. Long story short, 2 years later, they're calling us asking if we have a backup. No, we don't, because you're not a customer anymore, and we're not going to hold backups. That's risk for you and me. Their controller decided to leave. They deleted everything off the server on their way out the door, and no one had tested any backups. So the most recent backup that they had was 18 months old. They had an audit coming up 2 weeks later. So if we're doing backups, we need to be testing backups too. All right, so hope is not lost. We talked about a lot of the bad things that can happen, the heavy costs that are associated, time to recover, your business impacts, your reputational damage. There are things that you can do today that are economically feasible, should not tip over your budgets. It's budget season for a lot of folks, so you should be thinking about this and thinking about how you might need to adjust your budgets a little bit and start thinking about hardening some security. So The first one is going to be multi-factor authentication. We talked about how important that is. In most cases, you can turn that on in whatever systems and tools you're using for no additional charge. Is it a pain in the butt? Yes. Do any of us like multi-factor? No. Turn it on. Just do it. Passwords, don't reuse your passwords. I've been guilty of this in the past. I loved using the same password for everything, and then I started to learn and started to be a better password user. So don't reuse your password. Consider using passphrases. So instead of a password, it'll be something like Sam likes puppies, and then there's some special characters in there to make it more difficult to guess. And then have a code word. You can deal with financial transactions, big financial transactions often. And so if you get a weird email that's asking you to reroute a wire transfer or, change something that has to do with it, you and your team should have a code word that never gets texted, never gets put in an email, never gets saved anywhere. It's a conversation you have in the conference room. And so if I get an email from Megan that says, "Hey, Sam, we decided to move that transfer to a different account. Go ahead and send it here." I'm going to pick up the phone and call a number I know is Megan's and say, "Hey, Megan, I got this email from you. What's the code word?" And what that's going to do is protect against a bad actor who has rerouted phone calls and has AI that's presenting itself as Megan, but that AI is never going to know what that code word is. So that's a new tip that we've started seeing trending in the cybersecurity world, is having that code word that never gets stored digitally anywhere. Another one's going to be disk encryption. So if you're running a Windows Pro operating system, you probably have that chip that you need that's going to allow you to encrypt your disk. That's super important. It's like a security alarm for your house. So if someone were to get your laptop, take that disk out, and put that disk into something else, they're not going to be able to unencrypt it. So any of that data that you've stored on your physical device that's not in a cloud, that's being backed up and protected, having that disk encryption is going to be super important. And if you're on that pro operating system, like I said, you can turn it on. It's not going to cost you anything extra. Security awareness training and testing is my next one that's super affordable. In most cases, a couple dollars a month is going to get you this awareness training. It's going to be in a platform. You're going to have a record of who completed training. It might even automatically automatically re-enroll them in remedial training if they click on something when a simulated phishing attack is sent. And a simulated phishing attack is just a real-world phishing email that's been cleansed. So it's been made safe and it's been plugged into a platform and it's sent out to your team. And so they're getting tested on real world examples. So those are all some good ones. And then the last one is really partner with an expert. If you're unsure of or uncomfortable deploying and managing this kind of technology and managing those alerts, you don't have someone in-house that can do it, that has that sort of expertise, partner with a professional. For the same reasons that people come to you to build things for them or to design things for them, because they don't have that sort of expertise and skill set. Those are the reasons that you should consider partnering with someone that does have that skill set. And I think we have time. Yep. So I have an anecdote. We had a construction company of a client. They called me and said, "Hey, Sam, we want to have a meeting. We need to talk about cybersecurity." And it was a very ominous sort of phone call. And I said, "No problem. Let's set it up." And I thought, well, this can't be good. I better bring people to this call. So I bring a couple technicians, an engineer, security engineer, because I have no idea what we're walking into. And so we get there and there's four from their side and they said, "All right, so we need to let you know that we were breached." And I'm thinking, well, we don't have any alerts of that, thinking it's related to the hosting that we were doing for them for their Sage software. So as it turns out, they did not have multi-factor authentication on their Microsoft account. One of their administrative personnel had clicked on a phishing email, gave up their credentials. From there, the bad actor was able to create themselves a Microsoft admin account and reroute all emails and approve all emails that could make it to anybody in the organization. That allowed them to then use an alternate form of multi-factor authentication to take over the cell phone account and reroute all text messages. Once they took over the text messages, they moved quickly to make sure that they were into the bank accounts. And the organization figured out the text message thing pretty quickly. They were able to fix that, but it took them 3 days to figure out the email was also compromised. They end up getting a phone call from their bank. The bank is the one that said, "Hey, something's a little off about this wire transfer." And it almost cost them $60,000 and then some. So bless the bank, but in most cases, the bank isn't the one to catch it and contact you. They're processing requests. So that was my anecdote. So turn
Well,
on.
again, I think that I think that again speaks to this how involved these situations are, the layers and layers. And I love going all the way back to your tips, the code word. That when you mentioned that was new for me too. And I think even personally, that is a great one to use. So thank you so much. Um, I think we have a few minutes here for questions. So if you have a question for one of our panelists, you can just enter it into the chat. We'll monitor that and we'll get some of those answered.
There's a good one in there about the Internet of Things on construction sites and communication of those devices. I think we'll have Tammy, our director of cybersecurity services, put together a response, but I'll add a couple of tips about using the internet on construction sites. There needs to be separate networks for separate things. So we need to make sure we're using secured networks for internets of things, and we need to be using secured networks for employees, and we need to have separate networks for guests so that we can monitor all that traffic. And in a best case scenario where budget affords, having a SIM, so a security incident and event monitoring system that's correlating all of those logs and reporting back to a security operations center. That's sort of your sort of like if you're looking at good, better, best on a spectrum of cybersecurity approaches, that would be on the best end. James, Michael, any other stories come to mind that would maybe help support some of the things we've heard today?
I think just a good takeaway is that if you think you're immune from this, and just because you have a firewall, and I'm out in the field all the time, I'm talking to new prospects, I'm talking to clients, talking to people like James, there's the pushback that I get, this won't happen to us, we're a small family, we have a firewall, we don't have to worry about this. But this is, we work on the small to medium-sized business side. This is what they're looking for. They know that the smaller businesses, they don't have a full-time IT company or a company, a cybersecurity company like Visory watching them to make sure that everything's okay. So you're the target now if you're a small to medium-sized contractor. And it's a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And again, I don't think I'm ever going to scan a QR code ever again.
I'm sorry to ruin QR codes for you, but it's a thing. Yeah.
Okay.
It is
It's so
definitely a
easy to
thing.
take a sticker and put it over a menu where the QR code is.
That's
Oh,
it.
well, they've gotten so popular everywhere. They're everywhere for everything. Yeah.
Yeah.
What I had to add was I want to go back to this first and third party coverage exposure on an insurance policy. I think sometimes people forget that there's an out-of-pocket loss versus a loss to another party because of you as an insured, right? So what comes to mind was this was a large breach way back. It was a Target breach. I don't know if you remember that Target breach that
Yeah,
happened.
I remember the
Where
Target
there
one.
I do.
Yeah, and the way they got infiltrated into the Target system was an HVAC contractor who was servicing one of the systems. And because everything is so computerized on the HVAC side these days, the bad actors, and I think there's a question regarding advanced persistent threats on this thread, but the bad actors sat into the HVAC system for years until they found the right target. And then as the HVAC contractor accessed the target system to go ahead and work on the system, that threat, that virus, that malware then moved into the target system, and that's how they gained access, right? And if you're talking about third-party losses, those are the scary moments that you think about. Somebody else is getting affected by what I'm doing on a day-to-day job. And you don't think about it until it happens. And then you figure out that, wow, these guys have been sitting in my system for maybe years until they find the right moment to strike. And that's what happens, right? So I think it's just important to think about, yes, there is an out-of-pocket cost if something happens to me, like a business interruption where I'm losing money because my business is not up and running because of these reasons. But then you also have to think about what happens when somebody else is affected financially because of my system or what I've done wrong or malware that I've pushed to another system that I didn't even know existed. And that's the scary part, because many times they sit there silent without us knowing until they're ready to strike. And I think that's really scary, in my opinion.
That's why those next gen threat hunting agents have
Right.
really stepped up. We talk about products like Sentinel-1 and
Yep.
CrowdStrike and Microsoft Defender, and so they're using artificial intelligence to look at the behavior of a
Right.
thing and not wait for the signature of a thing. Which, when you have something that sits and lies in wait for 2 months, like Michael was talking about,
Right.
that's because there's not that advanced threat hunting that's looking for behavior. Because once it finds behavior that's consistent with a
Right.
malware or a ransomware attack that it's seen before, and by the way, it's learning from billions of endpoints that
Right.
it's protecting, it's able to say, whoa, this is step 3 of 16. I've seen this before. Let's block it, quarantine it, remediate it right away. And it does a fantastic job. I mean, those tools block 97+% of attacks. So now you're sleeping a little better at night going, okay, 2% of attacks might actually get past my defenses. Yeah.
Yeah, those are scary. And when the last scenario I had was on a business interruption where the actual insured or the client doesn't have control. Maybe they're on a cloud server, maybe they're on a Microsoft or Google Suites or something. And if those guys get breached and they're shut down, and you're dependent on that cloud server for your business every day, all day, and many are going into this cloud arena now, and it's not your fault that your system is shut down and you can't get emails or send emails, or your system is completely shut down. Who pays for that loss, right? When you can't do your business, right? And I think that's where the insurance comes in and helps to mitigate some of those losses on a first party basis in scenarios like that.
Sam, cloud accounts can be breached, right?
Correct.
Cloud accounts, sure. I mean,
Well,
anything.
Well, that's pushback I get. Oh, we have everything in the cloud. That won't happen.
Oh, goodness. Yeah. Yeah, no. Yeah, even the cloud is vulnerable, right? Nothing is safe.
Right.
Nothing can ever be 100% safe.
Right. And the other pushback we always seem to get is, hey, I use a vendor, so I'm not responsible for that data. That seems to be a big one. And that's not what the state laws kind of dictate. Um, So, even if you are using a vendor, whoever owns that data is responsible for the loss of the data. So, you can't push that exposure on someone else just because you use a vendor. Um, that it's unfortunate, but that's just the world we live in these days.
So I'm hearing a lot of great takeaways. Number one, know what your insurance policy requires from you and what it covers. So make sure you know those things and be insured is what we heard from Michael. Definitely don't skip it. You have to be insured. And then there are things that you can do. Michael and James both, you drove home, have your multi-factor turned on, make sure your teams are aware. And then I gave some extra technology stuff about password complexity and using things like disk encryption and advanced threat hunting. Those are all really good starts to moving into a really great hardened cybersecurity approach.
Yeah,
One more-
go for it.
there's in your contractor's package policy, general liability on the property, there's going to be a little bit of like a cyber endorsement in there. Those limits are, don't rely on that for a full cyber policy. Those limits are always very, very low, which is about 50,000. And they exclude all the important stuff, like social engineering and ransomware.
Oh man, great tip.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for adding that in there. So much good stuff. Thank you all, James, Michael, Sam. Thank you for all of your insights. Everybody who has attended, thank you for your time. We know time is valuable. So I will, everyone who is attending will receive a follow-up email with a link. It'll have everyone's contact information, a recording of the program, and some other information for each organization that's participated. So again, that will go out later today. We appreciate you so much. Thank you and have a good one.
Thank you, everyone.
Everybody.